think it's an interesting discussion on the various aspects of open science. So two disclaimers first before I start. So currently I've changed my role. This was a project which I was associated with earlier. So in my current role, I'm not working on the open source per se, but I do have an interest because of my prior association with this project. And when Kasturi asked me to speak also, this project is currently not in a very active phase, so I was a little hesitant. But then I think it's good to see what are the models which are there, and especially when you're talking of the diversity of open science. So I thought, okay, and also what are the learnings which we had, which could always be useful. The idea of sharing is to learn from each other's success and if there are any failures. So that's the reason why I accepted the invitation. And I think we've been talking of publications and so on and so forth. I'll switch the stream a little bit because my title was drug discovery. I think each one of us here have taken a drug at some point or the other. Without medicines, longevity would not be what it is today, right? So many times I think this is a mixed audience, but so those who come from the science background knows that there's a lot of R&D which goes when you develop a drug molecule. From the research laboratory to the market where it is actually you take the pill. And I'm not going to go into the stages, but yes, there's a lot of research which goes on in the lab, which we call the drug discovery, that is the discovery phase. And then you do the experiments in animals to test if it is safe and whether it's really acting on the disease the way you want. And then there is the clinical trials, wherein you actually test in the humans first for the safety and then the efficacy. Now, when it comes to this, typically what globally it is accepted, that it's a very expensive proposition to develop drugs from the research lab. So estimates suggest it can be 1 to 2 billion and the costs are only increasing. And second thing is, it's just not the cost, the other is the time it takes. Typically, it depends on the disease you are looking at, but on average, people say it can be 10 to 15 years by the time your actual research results in a drug which you can take. Now, why is that? So the one basic question one can ask, why does it take so long? And why is it expensive? And who does it? Typically, it's the pharma companies who do it, pharma and biotech all over. And why is it long and expensive? Because it's like searching for a needle in the haystack. So when you start in the research, you start with thousands of molecules or chemical molecules, for example, if you're talking of a chemical drug, and if you're talking about biotechnology, different things. And actually, the failure rate is very high in the sense that when you start with thousands and millions of molecules, by the time you come to actually even taking it to the animals, many molecules fail. And what you take it to the preclinical, what we call the preclinical is where the animal modeling is. And then by the time it comes to clinics, typically people say that if you take 5 drugs in the clinics, only 1 will succeed. So that shows that there is a lot of inherent failure in the process. So what pharma companies do is, who is going to pay for the failures? Like if I start with so many molecules, only 1 is making, and that may make profit. But then how do I recover the money I have spent on all these years of research? So what they do is, because they have an intellectual property, so that is where the IP comes when you talk of drug discovery. The IP is owned by the company, and since they have the monopoly, they can charge any price, and what the market can bear. So many of cancer drugs, which are really, going to millions of dollars nowadays, which is really unaffordable. Now, so that is the traditional model of drug discovery. So back in 2008, I can say, in the middle of 2000s in India, there was a group in CSIR where they thought, is there a better way of doing this? Or is there an alternate model of drug discovery? So that is where this open source drug discovery, and before I go to that, they thought of open source drug discovery. And now why do you need open source drug discovery? For a country like India, neglected diseases, there's a disease called tuberculosis, which probably is not heard so much in the Western countries, but in India, even today, every minute, at least 2 people are dying of tuberculosis. Now, and number 2 is malaria, for example. And there are many tropical diseases like this. The pharma model works on that the patient can pay a lot of money and they can recover them. There is no ROI when you work on a disease, because in India, patients cannot afford that kind of pricing. So what happens is, when a pharma company sets their portfolio, they are not going to dedicate so many resources, say for TB or malaria. So who is going to, I haven't shown the pipeline, but at one point you could see that there was no new molecule for TB for several decades, because nobody was investing in the R&D. And even today, TB detection is the old method which Robert Koch had found. So that is the status of these kind of diseases. So what do countries like India or the developing countries should do? So one of the ideas was, can we have a better model for drug discovery? So with that, this was started by CSIR, the parent organization to which we all belong, Council of Scientific. So it was like a consortium model, and it was a collaborative drug discovery platform for neglected tropical diseases. So we were restricted to only those diseases which pharma was not interested in. And at the peak of it, we had 7,500 participants from 130 countries. I'll go into a little, so what is interest of, I think, to the group here at a policy level? How does this model work? As I said, pharma companies have an IP, they have monopoly, so they will charge. So the interesting thing, at least to me personally, what was interesting of this was, and when you're talking of science, so everybody works on these molecules, and whatever you can, nobody was stopped from making a patent. You can patent, because many times the researchers get incentives, their promotions for publishing and patenting. If you take away that, there is no incentive for them. So what we said is that when the project, you can patent it, but then the patent rights also belong to the community, to the consortium. So it is not an individual patent. So and that information should be available in the domain for other researchers to work on. So open source, I know many of you know, it comes from the software industry, where they share the code, open source, and others can work on it. So that kind of philosophy was applied here. And this was funded by the government of India at that time, this whole project. So funding came from the government of India. People, universities, researchers, whoever was working on this could work with us, and they could patent, they could publish, but it was the patent rights were owned by the community. And we were doing clinical trials also. I'll talk about it a bit later. So government was funding the clinical trials also. And now what happens when you want to develop the drug? After drug development, when you want to really manufacture, we cannot do that. You have to go back to the industry. So now many of you know India is known for the generic drugs it makes in the, the story of AIDS. I think my previous speaker also alluded to it, that India is the pharmacy of the world because it produces generic drugs, which are nothing but off-patent kind of drugs, which can be manufactured by multiple companies, and that keeps so the idea was, if you develop a drug in the clinical trials, then you give it a non-exclusive license to the pharma companies who are interested in manufacturing this drug. So when it's a non-exclusive license, there is a competition, market competition, and when there is market competition, the drug becomes affordable. So that was the idea of this whole open source drug discovery, because the whole idea we were working on tropical diseases was to keep the drugs affordable. The minute you make it non-affordable, it beats the purpose. So that was the licensing policy of this. And so as I said, we had a portal which was an open portal where people could post their ideas, their research projects. It was open to the community, and then one could always have an attribution because it was date and time stamped. So if I post it on the portal, then I know that this is my idea and the date. So the question of people were wary in the beginning to share their ideas, which is a common thing. I think each of us is individualistic. But then, so we had a click-wrap license agreement which mandates that you are sharing. So when you're funded by this project, so this is the open innovation model or the OSDD strategy. So as I said, pharma companies have a very closed door policy. Everything is confidential, and they don't share their information unless in patents. I think that is the only time you really get to see something what is going on. But this was a so as you can see, there is a porous walled funnel for free ideas and projects. And the way this consortium worked was, we all know that academic researchers are doing excellent research, and many times they are not bothered, or they're not interested, or may not have the funding or the ability to take it to the drug discovery. So what this platform did was actually to kind of, suppose somebody is working on tuberculosis, they have a diagnostic or they have a drug kind of molecule. So this platform enabled them, we were to fund them, and not only just funding, but you could put collaborators. Say I'm a biologist, I need a chemist, or I may need a informatician. The idea was to build project around them. So it was more like a platform which kind of got the people together. So it wasn't just a funding agency, but it was also to bring these people. And another important part was it was not reliant only on the academic people. So this was actually working like a virtual drug discovery kind of a company. So there were people, professionals, and we were also working with some of the firms, even R&D, even private industries would come. Some collaborations were there. And we are also hired some contract research organizations. We find there is a gap in the project and we need something to be done. So we had these contract research organizations also pitching in. So it was marrying the two cultures, like academic and delivery focused, and OSDD, this platform, being the facilitator. So, and this is just one example. At that time, we had many partners. It was distributed. It was a virtual laboratory. So you had and in fact, the compounds were synthesized in one lab. They were sent to South India in another lab, and they were storing it. They were synthesizing it. So it was, and then there were companies working with us. So this was the kind of infrastructure. We had chemists, biologists, informaticians working. So this was, and we also had multiple international partners as well. So these were the two platforms I talked about. One is the CSIR-NIScPR. This was the heart of the thing, where you could actually post research projects. They could be seen by the community, and technically when results were to be posted on that. And when you enter this community, you accept the click-wrap licensing agreement that you are a part of this consortium. And another interesting project, which OSDD chemistry. So as I said, there's a lot of chemists in this country working on it. So one interesting thing is, in universities and in colleges, there are many people who come to train for chemistry. So we try to build a community of chemists, what we call, when they come in, you train them and get some compounds synthesized and make a library of that. So it's kind of, you're involving the community of chemists, and they would, again, it's a repository. And those compounds, and many times some chemist synthesizes a compound, he thinks, okay, it works on TB, but he doesn't have the wherewithal to do that. So then you connect it, a person biology who's doing it, then they get the data. So that was the kind of chemistry community we built. And there was a lot of crowdsourcing as well as one of the scientific tool. Again, I'll not go into the details, but many college students were involved. There was an online activity. Now we are talking of COVID, where everybody was working online, but this was a decade back when, people used to Skype each other and, talk to each other and share on Google Docs. And they did this entire annotation of an MTB genome. MTB is a Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which causes the disease. And so the genomic sequences were available. So these students actually, of course, there were boot camps to train them. And then they did this annotation of the genome, and then they published it. So this was another unique thing, that crowdsourcing as a scientific tool. People talk of Wikipedia, which is kind of crowdsourcing and things like that, but this was used for a scientific project. And we had a drug discovery portfolio. And again here, I just want to show that there was a researcher in IIT Bombay, and there was a researcher somewhere, they connected. And so we had an early discovery portfolio. And then this is just to show that I told you about this OSDD chemistry, which was actually from the universities, but then we have many CSIR labs. CSIR is like CNRS perhaps. We have 37 organizations across the country, and we had many chemists. So many of these chemists were also working specialized chemistry, and this CRO, I think many of you know that pharma companies also outsource their work to CRO. So we had also got a CRO. So this is to show that there was a multi-pronged approach towards the drug discovery. And the last point is clinical trials. All our own molecules were, as I said, it takes 10 to 15 years. So, but our own molecules perhaps were not ready for the clinical trials, but then we got into a collaboration with the Global TB Alliance based in the USA, which is actually supported by Melinda Gates Foundation. So they gave us a drug molecule called PA824, which was being developed for tuberculosis in other countries. So as a part of this consortium, they gave us free drug. They said, okay, here is the drug, you do clinical trials in India for the Indian patients. So we actually took up this molecule as well to take it to the clinical trials. And so those things were going on. So idea was to develop, suppose we get the molecule from our own portfolio. By then we already have the experience and also got this molecule into the clinical trials, and if it's successful, maybe to the market as well. So that was a clinical development strategy. And we had many global partners. We had TB Alliance for TB, and I forgot to mention, we had also ventured into malaria at that time, which is MMV, Medicines for Malaria Venture, and D&DI is a Drugs for Neglected Disease Initiative, which is based out of Geneva, and we were working with Royal Society of Chemistry for this chemistry, and Tres Cantos is again an open lab based in Spain, where they do, open lab screening. So we were working with many global partners, and so this is an example of an article which was published by this consortium, which was led by Professor Samir Brahmachari, who was the DG CSIR at that time and who took a very active interest in this. So they, in one line, open source movement, what was there in the software industry was applied to the pharma industry, and to apply, and the most important part is to translate the new drugs entering the market at prices determined by the generic combination. So it kind of combines because when you talk of generics, it's only the copycat molecules or something which is off patent, but here you are combining the new drug discovery with the with the generic market. So before I switch here, I would just like to say is that all this was going on good, but for various reasons which I don't want to go here in detail, this project, because when there's a change in leadership, sometimes things don't go the way they are. So this project kind of dwindled down. So we could not continue this project the way we wanted to. But what I would like to show is that many of this, then there was I think this is the learning, things don't go waste. So what happened was there was an ICMR, which is another organization within the government of India, which works on medical research, which is called as, they took up some of there was a TB consortium formed, and they took up some of these molecules in their research, and also there were many people who were doing their independent research. They also continued the work. And after this, I also want to show that there was a hackathon when COVID happened. There was an interest that can we do crowdsourcing kind of a thing. And based on some of these ideas, I and my couple of my colleagues were also involved. Based on our learnings, we did this drug discovery hackathon, which was led by the Office of PSA in 2020. And what I would like to show is that after this project, there's an offshoot of this project, if I can say, some of the people went on to form this foundation called as Open Source Pharma Foundation. It's based in Bangalore and New York, and it is being funded by the Tata Trust, and they are pursuing some of the research more in silico, and some clinical trials as well they are doing. And in fact, they talk about that one of the pioneering institutions included the Government of India's open source drug discovery. So this started in 2016, and some of our past associates are also working in this organization. So it's not that although our project may not have progressed the way we wanted, but some of the groups went on to start newer programs. This is one such example, Open Source Pharma Foundation. And it is not only us, I think there are many groups in the world also working on it. So this is a paper, I think again antibiotic resistance, and many of you must know there is a need for new antibiotics. This was a paper, and this is published by Matthew Todd. Again, Matthew Todd is a very big champion of open source pharma, and he is based in, I think, Australia now, and he runs this Medicines for Malaria, and he was also associated with us. So this is a paper. And another thing which I just like to share, there is this Drugs for Neglected Diseases, which is in Geneva. And I said, when I had gone to Germany for a conference, they invited me and they wanted to hear, I told you about this OSDD chemistry program, where a lot of young people were working. So they were also starting in 2016. They were inspired by a program, and I gave a talk, and they started something called as Open Synthesis Network, wherein, students, they're also working with some people in India as well to work on this project, where chemists are synthesizing compounds and in a crowdsourced manner and contributing it. So what I'm saying is the legacy continues in one form or the other. And the last slide is DeepSeek, and what I really liked is it tops the leaderboard among the open source models and rivals the most advanced closed source models globally. I think we cannot have a better example today than DeepSeek when you talk of open source. Thank you.
Long live India and France friendship.